Well, it is International Women's Day, and one area that is still subject to a massive pay gap is that of sport. I'm pleased to say the Federal Minister for Sport, Anika joins me on the program now. Thanks so much for your time, Minister. How do you think the gender pay gap in sport can be addressed, given it is so much wider than in just about all other areas now?
Well, firstly, it's not just International Women's Day, it's also your birthday. Happy birthday.
Thank you so much, Anika. Thank you, really appreciate that.
I'm glad. You're welcome. I'm glad for the question, because just the fact that it seems newsworthy to you, to me, makes it seem like we're making progress in elevating the question of the gender pay gap and justice for women in sport. Like you say, it is still live and inequitable, even if you look at what the teams at the Women's World Cup for FIFA that will be hosted by Australia and New Zealand in winter this year, what they will earn compared to what their male counterparts earned in Qatar last year. And like, it shows that we have a long way to go, even if things have started to tick up. In the domestic space, the Prime Minister and I actually at Kirribilli recently hosted the Wallaroos and Australian Rugby Union, because they've just put in the first professional pay system for their female athletes. Now, again, a long way to go, but we're starting to get those structural changes, and that's a good thing.
And we also need to see more women in positions of power in sport, executive positions. It's not just the pay gap for players or athletes as well.
That's right. And Josephine Sukkar, who was sort of one of the people that spearheaded that reform at the Australian Rugby Union, also is the chairwoman of the Australian Sports Commission, which is something that I look after as the Federal Sports Minister. You've got me as the Federal Sports Minister now. There are, I think, there's a lot to be excited about if you look at the Women World Cup competitions that have been hosted in New Zealand that are coming up in Australia. People like Jane Fernandez, who's running that for us here in Australia. There's lots of women who are rising to those leadership positions, and they are lifting up other women. So again, it is progress with an acknowledgement, a long way to go.
Now, I want to ask you about the Olympics in Brisbane in 2032. It's been reported that your government walked away from the $2.7 billion rebuild of Brisbane's Gabba Stadium after being spooked by 170% blowout in the preliminary costings. This report by Jamie Walker on the weekend. Is this correct?
Yeah. No, it's very dramatic. There was no walking away because there was nothing to start with. Like, the previous government didn't leave us with so much as a cent allocated for an imminent intergovernment agreement that had huge national importance for the next 8 to 10 years, nor was there any detail attached to what they intended to do. There was literally one line in a letter to the Premier, and that's all we had to go off. So there's no kind of walking away.
But are you worried about Are you worried about the cost blowout? I mean, in that story, it was reported that the $2.5 billion Brisbane Arena will have an Olympic swimming pool where the 17,000 seats will cost $147,000 each, $147,000 per seat. I mean, that is a massive blowout, isn't it?
Well, no, that's $2.5 billion costed for the Brisbane Live. I think what you're talking about, the blowout, relates to where the Gabba started as part of the host bid compared to where the Premier announced it when we announced the intergovernmental agreement. The $2.5 billion for Brisbane Live is what it costs to build a live entertainment venue with a drop-in swimming pool that is in a critical area of Brisbane, being walking distance to all of our live precincts. So yeah, it is complicated, but it's also a big, exciting idea. And when we, the PM, the Treasurer, the Infrastructure Minister, Finance Minister and I came to consider what was the best spend of Australian taxpayer money for the Brisbane 2032 Games, it came to a question of legacy and what would not be there but for the Brisbane 2032 Games occurring was kind of our guiding principle. And for us to be able to put a live entertainment venue into a place where it desperately is needed, the nearest live entertainment venue in Brisbane is actually in Boondall, which is in my electorate, and long may it rain, but there is an argument that something closer to town needs to be there. And it also dovetailed perfectly with our Revive Arts strategy, which we have just launched as a new federal government.